Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel where we bring you the most moving and unforgettable stories from the world of art and history. Stories that touch your soul, expand your vocabulary, and help you learn English in the most natural way. Today, I am going to tell you a story that is both heartbreaking and inspiring. It is about a man who painted with a passion so fierce that it burned him alive from the inside. A man who created some of the most beautiful and recognizable paintings in the history of the world. Paintings like the Starry Night, with its swirling, dreamlike sky. Paintings like the sunflowers, bursting with golden light. Paintings that now sell for tens of millions of dollars and hang in the greatest museums on earth. But here is the tragedy. During his entire lifetime, this man sold only one single painting. He lived in poverty, often unable to afford food or paint. He was laughed at, called a madman, and ignored by the art world. He spent his days lonely, tormented by a mental illness he could not understand. And he died believing he was a complete and utter failure. His name is Vincent van Gogh. How did a man who thought his life was worthless become, after his death, one of the most famous and beloved artists of all time? How did his pain, his loneliness, and his unique way of seeing the world create a new language of color and emotion? This is a story about the thin line between genius and madness. It is a story about a brother's love. And it is a story that proves that sometimes the world is simply not ready for the brightest lights. And as always, this story is a powerful way to improve your English. You will learn vocabulary about art, color, and deep human emotion. Words like impasto, palette, melancholy, and posthumous. So, open your heart and let us step into the world of Vincent van Gogh. Let us begin from the very start. Vincent Willem van Gogh was born on March 30th, 1853, in a small village called Zundert, in the Netherlands. The landscape of his childhood was flat and green, with wide, gray skies and endless fields of wheat. He was the oldest surviving son of Theodorus van Gogh, a strict but loving minister in the Dutch Reformed Church, and his wife, Anna Cornelia. Vincent was not the first child born to his parents. Exactly 1 year before his birth, on the very same date, another baby boy had been born, and he had been named Vincent. That baby had died. So, little Vincent grew up walking past a graveyard where he saw his own name on a tombstone. This strange, haunting fact cast a shadow over his soul from the very beginning. As a child, Vincent was quiet, serious, and intensely emotional. He did not have many friends. He preferred to wander alone through the fields and forests, collecting insects and flowers, observing the smallest details of nature. He was a thoughtful boy, but also a difficult one. He was stubborn, moody, and hard to reach. His mother, who was herself an amateur artist, encouraged him to draw. He would sit for hours with a pencil and paper, sketching the world around him. But no one, not even Vincent himself, thought he would become a painter. Art was just a hobby. Vincent's father wanted his son to have a respectable profession. So, at the age of 16, Vincent was sent to work for his uncle's company, an international art dealership called Goupil & C. He moved to The Hague, and later to the London and Paris branches. He was a young, shy boy in a smart suit, learning to sell paintings to wealthy clients. For a while, it seemed to work. He was diligent and intelligent. But Vincent was too emotional for the business world. He could not hide his feelings. If a customer wanted to buy a painting that Vincent thought was ugly, he would try to argue them out of it. This was not good for sales. In London, Vincent experienced his first great heartbreak. He fell deeply in love with the daughter of his landlady, a young woman named Eugenie Lawyer. He kept his feelings secret for a long time, building up a fantasy. When he finally confessed his love to her, he was devastated to learn that she was secretly engaged to another man. The rejection crushed him. He became withdrawn, bitter, and obsessed with religion. His work at the art dealership suffered badly. He was eventually fired. It was a deep humiliation, and he had no idea what to do with his life. Vincent decided to follow in his father's footsteps. He wanted to become a minister, to preach the word of God to the poor and the suffering. He threw himself into religious study, but the rigors of academic theology were too much for his restless mind. He failed the entrance exams. He refused to give up, however. He found a temporary position as a missionary in a bleak coal mining district in Belgium called the Borinage. This was the darkest, most desperate place he had ever seen. The miners lived in terrible poverty, working long hours underground in dangerous conditions. Vincent wanted to live like them, to share their suffering. He gave away his clothes, his money, his food. He slept on a hard wooden plank in a dirty hut. He went down into the mines and saw the black dust, the bent bodies, and the tired, pale faces. The church authorities who had sent him there were horrified. They thought his behavior was extreme and undignified. He was dismissed from his post. At the age of 27, Vincent van Gogh was a complete failure. A failed art dealer. A failed teacher. A failed preacher. He had no money, no home, and no future. He was in the deepest pit of despair. And it was there, in that dark hole in the ground, surrounded by the poorest of the poor, that he found his true calling. He picked up a pencil and began to draw the miners. He drew their worn hands, their bent backs, their tired but dignified faces. He had finally found a way to preach. Not with words, but with images. Vincent decided to become an artist. It was a crazy, impossible dream. He had no training and no talent for classic beauty. But he had something more important, a burning, desperate need to create. His younger brother, Theo, was now working at the same art dealership in Paris. Theo was the opposite of Vincent. He was calm, steady, and successful. And Theo loved his difficult brother deeply. He believed in Vincent when no one else did. He made a promise. He would support Vincent financially, sending him money every month so he could buy food, brushes, and canvas. This arrangement would last for the rest of Vincent's life. And without Theo, there would be no paintings, no sunflowers, and no Starry Night. Theo was the silent hero of this story. Vincent began to teach himself to draw, with a furious intensity. He practiced obsessively, drawing the same objects over and over again, trying to master perspective and anatomy. His early paintings were dark and somber, filled with the browns and grays of the Dutch countryside. He painted peasants eating potatoes in a dimly lit room. The most famous of these early works is The Potato Eaters. The faces are rough, bony, and ugly by classical standards. But they're real. They're honest. Vincent did not want to paint pretty pictures. He wanted to paint the truth. In 1886, Vincent moved to Paris to live with Theo. This was a revolution for him. Paris was the center of the art world, and a new movement was exploding, Impressionism. Artists like Claude Monet, Edgar Degas, and Camille Pissarro were painting not with the dark, realistic tones of the old masters, but with light. They used quick, visible brushstrokes, and they painted everyday life. Vincent's eyes were opened. His palette, the range of colors he used, suddenly burst into life. He abandoned the dark browns and embraced bright, shocking colors, yellows, blues, and oranges. He painted the streets of Paris, the cafes, the bridges over the River Seine. But Paris soon became too much for him. He was overwhelmed by the city, and his nervous, difficult personality clashed with the other artists. He drank too much, smoked too much, and his mental health began to fray. He felt a deep, urgent need for light. He dreamed of a place where the sun burned so brightly that it would fill his paintings with pure color. He looked at a map and found the perfect place, Arles, a small town in the south of France. In February 1888, Vincent arrived in Arles. It was covered in snow, but soon spring came and the landscape exploded into blossom. The orchards were filled with pink and white flowers. The fields were golden with sunflowers. The light was so intense that everything seemed to vibrate. And Vincent worked like a man possessed. He painted outside for hours, the hot sun burning his skin, the wind whipping his canvas. He painted day after day, producing over 200 paintings in just 15 months. This was the most productive and creative period of his life. He painted the yellow house where he lived. He painted his bedroom with its simple furniture. He painted the cafe at night, its terrace glowing under a gas lamp. And he painted the sunflowers, a series of breathtaking canvases that seemed to radiate warmth and life. He dreamed of creating a studio of the South, a community of artists living and working together in harmony. He persuaded Theo to convince another artist to come and join him, Paul Gauguin. Gauguin was a proud, arrogant man, an ex-stockbroker who had abandoned his family to become an artist. Vincent admired Gauguin intensely. He was desperate for his approval. He prepared the yellow house, decorating the walls with his paintings, hoping to create a paradise for artists. Gauguin arrived in October. At first, they worked together, and there was a fragile peace. But the two men were like fire and gasoline. Vincent was a storm of emotion, working frantically, spilling his soul onto the canvas. Gauguin was cold, calculating, and intellectual. They argued endlessly about art and life. The tension in the small yellow house grew thicker by the day. Vincent was terrified that Gauguin would leave him, and his mental state began to spiral out of control. On the night of December 23, 1888, the pressure reached a breaking point. During a violent argument, Gauguin stormed out of the house. Vincent, in a state of complete mental collapse, followed a strange, terrible impulse. He took a razor blade, and he sliced off part of his own left ear. He wrapped the piece of flesh in newspaper, left the house, and walked to a nearby brothel. He gave the package to a woman there and then staggered home, bleeding heavily. The police found him unconscious in his bed the next morning. Gauguin left Arles immediately, and the dream of the studio of the South died. Vincent was admitted to the hospital in Arles. The people of the town were afraid of him. They signed a petition to have him removed. He was not just a strange painter. He was a danger to himself and, they believed, to others. He was deeply humiliated and alone. But even in the hospital, he painted. He painted the ward, the doctors, the view from his window. Art was his only medicine. In May 1889, Vincent voluntarily admitted himself to the St. Paul de Mausole Asylum in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. It was a former monastery, a quiet, beautiful place surrounded by gardens, cypress trees, and rolling hills. He was given 2 rooms, one to sleep in and one to use as a studio. Through the barred window of his room, he looked out at the landscape. And from the depths of his suffering, he created his most transcendent works. From the window of the asylum, he painted the view again and again, at different times of day, in different weather. And one night, he looked out and saw not just a sleepy village under a dark sky, but a cosmos alive with energy. He painted the starry night. The sky does not just sit still. It whirls, rolls, and explodes. The stars are not tiny dots. They are huge, pulsating balls of white and yellow light. The cypress tree in the foreground shoots up like a dark green flame, connecting the earth to the heavens. The brushstrokes are thick and swirling, a technique called impasto, where the paint is laid on the canvas so heavily that it stands out from the surface. You can almost feel the motion of his hand, the intensity of his gaze. He also painted irises, a garden of purple flowers bursting with energy, each one an individual, living thing. He painted the wheat fields, golden waves under a turbulent sky. He could not stop painting. In the year he spent at the asylum, he created some of the most iconic images in Western art. Painting was his anchor in the storm. He wrote to Theo, "I put my heart and my soul into my work and have lost my mind in the process." In May 1890, Vincent left the asylum and moved to Auvers-sur-Oise, a village near Paris, to be closer to Theo. Theo had a wife, Johanna, and a new baby boy, whom they had named Vincent Willem. The doctor in Auvers, a man named Paul Gachet, who was himself a lover of art, was asked to look after Vincent. The early weeks were productive. Vincent painted Dr. Gachet with a sad, thoughtful face. He painted the church at Auvers, a strange, twisted building under a deep blue sky. He painted fields of wheat stretching to the horizon. But the darkness was closing in. Vincent was consumed by guilt about being a burden to Theo, who was now struggling financially. The attacks of mental anguish continued. He felt an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. He could see no future where he was not a cause of suffering to the brother he loved so deeply. On July 27, 1890, Vincent walked into a wheat field behind the Chateau of Auvers. It was a warm, quiet afternoon. The crows flew up from the golden grain, a scene he had captured in one of his final, ominous canvases, Wheatfield with Crows. Somewhere in that field, Vincent van Gogh took out a small pistol. He had borrowed it from the innkeeper, claiming he needed it to scare away the crows. He pressed the gun to his chest and pulled the trigger. The shot was not instantly fatal. He staggered back to the inn, bleeding, and collapsed. The innkeeper found him and called for a doctor. Theo was summoned from Paris immediately. When Theo arrived, he found his brother lying in a small, dark room. Theo climbed into the bed and held Vincent in his arms. "I tried to die, but I missed," Vincent whispered. Theo, his heart shattering, could only reply, "Don't leave me, Vincent." For 2 days, Theo held him, speaking of their childhood, of the wheat fields, of their love. In the early hours of July 29, 1890, Vincent van Gogh died in his brother's arms. He was only 37 years old. His last words to the weeping Theo were, "The sadness will last forever." A small funeral was held. Theo was so devastated that he could barely function. He was a man broken by grief. His physical health, already fragile, collapsed. Just 6 months after Vincent's death, Theo van Gogh died as well, at the age of 33. The two brothers, who had been each other's world, were now buried side by side in the cemetery at Auvers, covered in ivy. After Theo's death, his young widow, Johanna van Gogh Bonger, was left with an apartment full of hundreds of Vincent's paintings. These were considered worthless by the art world. She was advised to throw them away. But Johanna had read the hundreds of letters that Vincent had written to Theo, letters full of intelligence, passion, and a profound understanding of art. She understood that her husband's difficult brother had been a genius. She dedicated the rest of her life to making the world see what she saw. She organized exhibitions. She sold paintings to collectors and museums. She published the letters, which became one of the greatest autobiographies ever written. It was her relentless, brilliant work that turned the unknown suicide into a global legend. Today, Vincent van Gogh is a giant. His paintings sell for prices that would have made him weep with disbelief. The portrait of Dr. Gachet sold for over $82 million. The irises for over $53 million. Millions of people queue for hours every day to see his works in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. His face, with its red beard and intense eyes, is instantly recognizable everywhere. The man who sold one painting in his life is now one of the most famous human beings who has ever lived. Now, what can we learn from the tragic and beautiful life of Vincent van Gogh? First, your value is not determined by the world's recognition. Vincent was ignored, laughed at, and called a failure. But he kept painting because it was his truth, his voice. He did not change his style to suit the market. He painted his soul. In your life, do not measure your worth by the praise or criticism of others. Your authenticity is your greatest masterpiece. Second, turn pain into beauty. Vincent's life was full of suffering, loneliness, poverty, mental illness. But he did not just suffer. He took that pain and transformed it into something that brings joy and comfort to millions, even a century later. Your struggles can be the source of your deepest creativity. Do not waste your pain. Use it to build, to write, to paint, to speak. Third, a single supportive relationship can change the world. Without Theo, there would be no Vincent van Gogh. His brother's unconditional love and financial support gave him the space to create. And without Johanna, the world would never have seen the paintings. Be a Theo to someone. Support a dream that others do not see. And if you are a Vincent, struggling and feeling alone, find your anchor, even if it is just one person. Fourth, there is profound beauty in simplicity. Vincent painted sunflowers, a bedroom, a chair, a starry sky. He found the eternal in the everyday. You do not need a grand, exciting life to create something of value. Look closely at the ordinary things around you. They are filled with wonder. And finally, it is never too late to start. Vincent did not pick up a brush seriously until he was 27, a failed preacher with a broken heart. He had only 10 years to paint, and he created over 2,000 artworks. Do not tell yourself you are too old, too untalented, too late. The time is now. Begin. Vincent van Gogh once wrote in a letter to his brother, "What am I in the eyes of most people? A nonentity, an eccentric, or an unpleasant person. Somebody who has no position in society and will never have. In short, the lowest of the low." Very well, even if this were all absolutely true, then I should one day like to show by my work what such an eccentric, such a nobody, has in his heart. He has shown us. Oh, how he has shown us. The starry night still swirls. The sunflowers still glow. And Vincent, the nobody, is now a star, shining forever. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone who loves art or someone who needs to be reminded of their own hidden value. And let me know in the comments, which Van Gogh painting is your favorite and why. I read every comment. Until next time, keep creating, keep feeling deeply, and remember that even in the darkest night, there are stars waiting to be seen. Bye for now.